Thanks so much for jumping in on this too, Alex. This is going to be awesome.
Absolutely, man.
Just to give you a little bit of kind of background. As you know, Alex, we've been doing these video sessions that we're calling huddles with candidates that are looking for a role. And in our conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago, and just from following you on LinkedIn, we know that you are really good at building up your personal brand on LinkedIn and really telling a good story. And it's something that job candidates can definitely take advantage of. But in particular, Miriam, for example, has a really interesting background. Obviously, very smart, very sharp. Was working at the UN and wants to get into an SDR type role. And part of the issue is that right now, when you go on to Miriam's profile, it doesn't kind of scream out, "Hey, I'm an SDR, kind of hire me." So we want to really dive into that as much as she'll allow us. And then Pete, on the other hand, is like a natural networker. Peter Salib. I don't know if you guys have kind of met each other or know each other from before, but he is someone who's really active and involved in the like startup and tech ecosystem, and he's really interested in getting into a role where he can like leverage that. For example, TechStars or any other sort of like accelerator program that will allow him to just like be a connector and kind of form partnerships. But it's challenging for him as well since he is sort of like involved in so many different things. Like, how does he really like hone in and start to like target, what are the key things that he wants people to take away when they engage with his LinkedIn content? So the session is really yours, Alex. Like, if you want to kind of just like give us some of the core principles, if you want to workshop with the both of them, if you want to share your screen, I can kind of moderate and lead, but just really kind of excited to hear what you have to say.
Awesome. Great. I'm definitely going to share my screen. I think the best way might be to just sort of pull up y'all's profiles, kind of go over this, and then the core principles will kind of come up as we go through it. Miriam, he brought you up first, so probably start there. How to tell the story of United Nations to sales dev? That's an interesting one. I like it.
Yeah, I feel like it's one that I haven't heard before or ever even seen, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's start with what is that story for you? I mean, why does that appeal to you? Is it something that just seems like the most logical option, or how did that come about for you?
So basically, my background is in economics. I graduated in 2017. I ended up working at my family business, which is my first position that I have on there. That's kind of what I did during the summer while I was at school. I was also pre-med while I was at school. So I thought that I would be going to med school afterwards. That kind of wasn't what I wanted in the end. I was more interested in finance and business. I was always an econ major, and that kind of just like went out in the end. So after I graduated, I was really unsure like if I should go back to school or if I should start working. So I kind of ended up working for my dad. And during that process, I really realized I liked like finance and I wanted to go into that field. So last summer or last spring, basically, I started applying to a bunch of positions like in finance, like at banks or any big firms like hiring financial analysts or something like that. So I ended up getting this position at the UN kind of through a mutual connection, and it was something that was really interesting to me. So I ended up taking it, and it was more of an economic and financial position, but it was a lot of research and analysis. It was a lot of like client facing and like talking to people, which I really enjoy because I'm not the type of person that likes to like sit behind a computer for too long. So I really enjoy that position, but joining it, I knew that it wasn't a full-time thing. It was a contract position and it was going to end after like 6 months or so. So I ended up extending it a little bit longer than the initial 6 months, but I knew from the beginning that it wouldn't be something that would be long term. And then while I was at that position, I started applying to different things. And kind of in February or January, I kind of applied to a bunch of positions, and I was still applying to banks and like different finance jobs. And I ended up applying to MuleSoft at Salesforce as an SDR. And I got another role at another startup, which is a whole separate story that I ended up accepting too. It was a bad experience for me. The company was just like very not transparent. It was not a good experience. So I ended up leaving. And before that, I dropped out of the SDR interview process at MuleSoft. And then going back, after I quit that job, this was in the beginning of May, I realized like that would have been a really good position for me because I had connected with a lot of people at MuleSoft and Salesforce. So like just seeing through like LinkedIn and learning more about that company, I thought that it would be a really good fit for me and just something that I think I could have a future in or in a career in. And I really want to go into tech rather than finance now. And I think that the best pathway in there would be an SDR role.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Good.
I was trying to condense it without like leaving out big gaps, but that's kind of the general story.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think this is sort of a silly leading question, but some parts of that story I think are valuable, if not all, but at least some of it. And I mean, to state the obvious, none of that is on here, right? None of that is visible.
Yeah, no, I have absolutely no idea how to convey what I want through my LinkedIn.
Well, I think the main point to start with is what is the interviewer's mindset? And so a hiring manager, especially in tech, is going to probably look at your LinkedIn first, more than the resume. And what's going through their head is, do I have time to dedicate to seeing whatever action or process through? And if it's a conversation or interview, if they even respond to you in a meaningful way, they need to finish that dialogue, and that takes some time. So if you don't hear back from interviewers, one reason can be they didn't know enough to know if the dialogue was worth starting. Because like on the face of it, this is like, all right, I don't get it. Like I don't get your SDR job application. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll read your cover letter, but like, why?
Right.
So ideally, I'd want to see that story told, explaining all this right up front, so I know if it's worth getting into the thing in general. And it's not intuitive to think about, but for someone to respond, call and ask questions, or just sort of do a 10-minute call, you might be thinking, well, it's so easy. Just sort of ask me that, and I'll tell you. But that takes a lot of time, and energy to just dedicate to it. So try not to make people dedicate time and energy before they get there. And normally I'm talking about this to salespeople, saying the same thing. And I'm saying, okay, well, if your profile is blank, people don't know if they should even engage with your outreach when they get to you. And so the way I like to do that, and this, I'm not looking for a job, but for mine is I have my profile is very clear about my story when you get to it. And I want people, no matter what it is you're looking for, this is your section, right? I mean, the headline and then the about section, those are the two key places, right? So if there was a landing page or an advertisement for you, the person, those two are right where it is. You can get fancier and feature content, do what you need, and write descriptions here, add an image in the background. All that's fine and good, but these are the two places to do that. And you really just tell a story, and there's no real limit on how you do that. You can tell the story, I mean, preferably not leaving important parts out, but like, don't feel the need to have it be a chronological timeline. So, I mean, if I were to change your headline, I would leave this intact. This is your job title, leave that intact. But your headline, you can say something to the effect of like, X United Nations looking for SDR role. Ask me why.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting. Sure. Like, I'll read that. And then your about section, which is currently blank, add it, and then start to tell that story. And so, I mean, the parts I might focus on would be, I mean, no one begrudges you for like your first job not being where you want to end up. That's totally fine. But the natural questions are, well, if you were in finance and economics, I'm going to think if you get into sales, you'll be somewhat financy. So like explain why that's not the case. So you're going to want to overcompensate just a tad for the perception that finance and economics is dry and not client facing and not exciting. To a tech salesperson who's like, like bombastic, outgoing. It doesn't have to be. I'm not like that. It's not. That's not what I'm saying. Is you have to be just bouncing off the walls, but overcompensate slightly for the perception of yourself, and you just do that through. You can do it through the description too. You can talk about the parts of this job in this description that you liked the best.
Okay.
Like even down here, like I'm trying to let people get to know me and what I focus on with the job descriptions. And so played the ukulele in the office, reported with joy to the great Jessica Ma is like, okay, that's more than just the quota attainment numbers. But the fact that I put the quota attainment down here and the description up here says something. So I would use this part to be like, what are the parts of working at the what was interesting? What's going to capture people's attention? How did that get you where you wanted to go? And you can just sort of craft that story here. And so I guess I want to say just make more use of this because it's easy people to look at it. And you want a hiring manager to come here and get your story pretty quickly. Like just sort of glance at headline. Okay, interesting. Glance at about. That makes sense. Glance at UN. Huh. Okay, that rings true too. Maybe I'll email her back. Or maybe this makes sense, right? Easier to pass your profile around too. Because what a hiring manager will do, they'll be like, hey, what do you think? LinkedIn profile over Slack. They'll just like message it over and be like,
right.
And right. By having this there, you'll make it easier for them to process that.
Okay.
What do you think of that?
I actually have a question about, so usually a lot of times, like when I see someone applying for an SDR role or someone that is an SDR already, they have a lot of numbers on their profile, like quotas that they've reached or something like that. Whereas the positions that I've had, I don't have that same kind of quantitative background or like something to display. So how do I compensate for something like that? Is it just like you said, saying stuff that was interesting about the roles that I have done? Like, for example, sorry to interrupt, like when I had an interview before one time, like they asked me, okay, you have never done an SDR role. It wasn't an interview, it was just kind of like a pre-interview. And she was like, how do we know you'll be able to like reach a quota or do something like that? And I feel like I didn't have the best answer for that.
I mean, it's kind of a trick question because no one knows they're going to be able to reach a quota, but they're
right.
seeing how you respond
right.
more than anything. In my first sales job interview, I had 0 stats, and I was a philosophy major coming from an internship where I did no sales whatsoever. And my burly football coach, sales manager to be, asked me, well, how does a philosophy degree translate to sales? And I was like, philosophy is just selling ideas. This is simply a different product. I thought of that on the fly, but he was later like, that makes sense. And there were numbers to back it up. He just liked the story. Everyone assumes that if you put numbers there, you're going to cherry pick the numbers. And also be honest about it. I mean, if it is your first SDR role, people are looking for that. They want someone for whom it is their first role. So I would just discuss that. I would use the about section and be like, if it was me, I'm spitballing here, but I would just be like, once I get through the initial story, I would say something to the effect of like, looking at this profile because I applied to your sales development role. Great. Let's get the obvious out of the way. I'm entry level in sales.
Right.
No two ways about it. I would literally just be like, that's me. This is my story. It's who I am. Like, unabashedly there. And then get into, you already know some of those interview questions, right? Like, what makes you think you get a quota? What's, what do you like about the role? You have those stories. So pre-answer those questions here. Like, get through the initial interview in your profile. And you could even put like, how do I know I'm going to hit quota? I don't. But here's what I'm going to do, right? I do the same thing here with like, here's what you're probably doing. And I just get through their objections up front. And I know what they're thinking, so I'm going to write about what they're thinking. Same here. Like, what an SDR manager is thinking roughly. You've had some interviews. So just like think about what are the questions that I was asked. And then write it down here. And be ultra honest and go one step further. So if someone's like, you've never hit quota before, well, what are the analogies? When did you have a goal and when did you hit it and how did you go about hitting it?
Yeah, that's kind of what I answered that question with. I kind of just explained stuff that I have done and how I was able to attain that goal.
I mean, what's an example of how you answered that just in brief in a past interview?
So my first role that was at Metropolitan, they kind of were revamping their whole finance and accounting department. And I was in process with that, and I worked directly under our CFO, and I kind of explained all the processes that I helped with and like kind of talked about the numbers that were changed and different hubs that met their quota and stuff like that. That was kind of what I went in depth with.
Cool. I'm just going to spitball like an example of how I'd answer that question on my profile. I might be like, you might see financial experience and not sales experience. Have you tried selling new accounting systems to your own CFO? I did too.
That's good.
That was tricky. Let me explain how to sell to a CFO who knows you well. Sometimes even harder than one you don't. So, and I'm just making this up as I go along, but I mean, in the same way, you're just translating whatever you're just telling the story of how it fits in this, like, I hit my goal, here's what I did to communicate well, and here's how I got around a barrier. I imagine in terms of communicating with new people, like being at the UN probably had plenty of that.
Right, yeah.
What was a time when you had a tricky communication problem you solved at the UN?
But I mean, it's a lot. Working at the UN was really a great experience, but you're facing trouble like all the time. Like, so I worked for a specific mission at the UN, and every single country has their own stance on what they want to do. So most of the time, like, my supervisor would tell me to go to this meeting, say how we feel about it, and report back to me. And I would have to go to a meeting, say our stance, and 20 people would argue with me. And I obviously couldn't say anything. I was just working under someone else. So it's kind of a lot of managing other people's expectations and knowing what to say without hurting anybody's feelings.
That's great. Yeah. And getting things done without hurting anyone's feelings. A ton of that. Right? It gets going, but like, this is how if I'm a hiring manager, but like, oh yeah, that's badass. Like, I don't know that you've made 20 calls in per hour or whatever. I need to know that you've done some. This is much harder to do.
Right.
And so, I mean, hell, I would almost like apply to an AE role if I were you. Just shoot high. Why not? Right.
Right.
I went from moral philosophy to full cycles. I didn't know the difference. I was just like, this is a sales. I actually applied to research, but they in a sales job.
So. The first role I actually applied to too was an account executive role because I had no idea at MuleSoft. I had no idea that it was like a higher level role because it was at MuleSoft, but it was a public sector role. So I thought that would be perfect with my UN experience. That's kind of how I leveraged to get that interview. I messaged someone on LinkedIn that was the director of SDRs, and I said, hey, I found this position, and I think that would be a perfect fit for it. And he shot me an email back and said, actually, we only hire SDRs first before you can be an account executive if you don't have any sales experience. And that's how I got my interview.
It makes sense. Public sector sales is like, they typically hire people who have sold a lot to government before because they're hiring you for your Rolodex. So it's less about the public sector experience at the UN and more about like, have you literally sold products to these people before? And like, that's federal sales, which I would never want to do.
I think that wasn't after I learned more about it, I think that it wasn't the fit for me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't need to keep doing this for every single story, but like, this is how I would write. I mean, you don't have to be like as ridiculous and marketery as I'm being. But the point is, like, telling that story, you know what they're going to ask about, you know what they're going to be concerned about. So, address it in whatever way you think makes the most sense. It has to be there's a Venn diagram between things that are true and things that are going to be the most impactful to tell. And choose the one in the middle. Like, you don't have to say something that is true but is irrelevant, nor should you say something that are impactful but not true. So there's just a combination of those two, and you're basically golden for writing this. If you want to get a little crazy, write a post. I write tons of posts, and they're fun, and they can help people get a sense of who you are before you talk to them. So an example might be 3 things I learned from. Oh, I'm already on the profile. 3 things I learned from my first 2 SDR interviews. Boom. Here's what it taught me, and like, you could even just sort of write on that. Like, it doesn't have to be long. It's just like, here's a thing I learned. Here's a thing that I'm going to teach you. It's just a short little, thingy. Spaced up with line breaks, dial down the vocabulary level from what you're used to, and like, you're golden, basically. It's not that complicated. Yeah, I mean, that would be the extension of it is if I'm looking at somebody, I want to get to know them, I'm going to look at their posts and be like, well, what do they think? What do they believe? Who is this person? And that's how I'm going to do it.
I mean, I think a lot of what Alex is doing is obviously being himself and showing, not telling. Be an SDR. A few candidates that we're working with are actually putting together B2B style email cadences, sending them out, managing a large number of like job prospects. Tell your kind of story of doing that, and a lot of the skills that they're looking for are sort of related to that, how well you can communicate over email and things like that.
I'll give you a cheat sheet template for your outreach message too, if you want. If you do write a post, for example, take the post, grab the link to it, shorten the link because connection requests are short. Grab your short link and then write something like this as a connection request message. And this is just you applying to a job, but you might be like, hey, 2A's. Hello, Yako with 2A's. Just finished the coolest SDR application I've come across. Thought I'd add some context. Here's my view on, I guess, whatever the topic is that they asked about in the interview. It could be, communicating with financial buyers.
Okay.
And yeah, it's not really taking too long, talking as though you'd be just kind of like chatting with a friend, keeping it light,
Right.
Very simple.
Yeah, I feel like that's something I've definitely learned this last month or two. I feel like I was very formal in a lot of my approaches, and you don't need to be, especially when I'll write someone an email and they'll get back to me and be like, hey, that's cool. Or let's get on the phone, or that's great. And I'm like, I just wrote you a huge page and I got 3 letters back or 3 words back. So that's definitely something that I feel like is interesting and something have changed and willing to change in the future.
Good.
Love it.
Sarah Brazier is one of the best at this. So I talked to her on the phone. She's the exact same way. But that's awesome. This is not even slightly formal.
Yeah.
That's actually pops in real life. And I remember after my first job at an FX trading brokerage, I was super formal. I was wearing a suit and tie for 2.5 years. And I got to my tech role, which was an AE role, because that's what I'd done at the brokerage. I was I'm a closer. So I was so stiff that my sales manager fed me a beer at 10 a.m. to have me move more, and it was helpful in hindsight. But we were talking to tech founders, and they don't talk like finance. They don't speak like that.
Yeah.
And the mentality there is they're, sort of moving too fast and breaking too many things to bother with formality. And that's the reason underlying why it's cool to be less formal in tech. It's because you're almost too busy to be formal.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I sent someone a message earlier this week to kind of just connect and go over a position I applied to. Actually, the hyper science one that we were talking about, and he messaged me back and just said, cool, let me know what time works best for you. And I was like, this is so informal. And so he just he didn't even write let me know. He just wrote let me know. And I was like, okay, this is very surprising compared to what I've seen before, especially working at the UN before this, where everything is written in formal letters.
Yeah, company size makes a difference too. So this dude works at a big company with thousands of employees in it. And he says hi, not hey. Are you interested in an intro? But still, there's company can't really afford us, So, it depends on company size that affects it. Industry affects it. There's a formality spectrum across where you go, and tech startup is the ultra low formality.
Okay.
Cool, Peter. Don't want to leave you out.
Yeah, no, that was great. I love listening in to that. Super awesome. I'm excited for you, Megan.
Thanks.
I know we heard a bit of background up front, but I'd love to hear your story from you about where you're coming from, where you're going.
I've kind of always been an entrepreneur at heart. Tried my own startup back in college, and that kind of threw me into the event world. So I've been to CES in Vegas 8 years in a row, and been to Art Basel, South by Southwest, Web Summit, Collision, and I did name all of them, tons of conferences. So through that, I just built up a huge network of all sorts of founders and different things like that. And I've been able to create a lot of opportunities through that. So I was able to help a bunch of different founders get featured in different articles. I was doing PR at that time. I was kind of like a multi-tool. I was kind of selling multiple things to, different companies. That's how I got started. In PR, that's kind of where I really shifted and got more involved with startups. started having them as like clients formally. I've got equity in several different startups as clients because they were some early stage. Some of them are now decent names that you've probably heard of, especially if you're in New York. And then I kind of just went on to start my own event tech company. I was a co-founder of. I moved to Denver to pursue that. It didn't work out. We ended up shutting it down, but it wasn't a cold shutdown. We were able to sell the brand and customer list and all the tech we had. We sold it to another set of founders that took it over. So that's like a micro win, I guess, on that level. And then I realized that I don't want to be a founder. I actually just want to support founders, but I still identify as an entrepreneur. So I don't know, sometimes that makes sense. I've, experienced somewhat of an identity crisis, like what do I call myself? So, I've been using solutionist as my thing, just because I am doing multiple things. I'm selling, I'm doing media, connecting people on a high level, on a regular basis. So now I'm working for Gadget Flow, which is one of my original clients back from my PR days. And that's going great, but I'm looking for something that aligns with something for my need to be a little more impact driven. And I want to, if it's sales, I want to be involved in selling something that is truly, truly amazing and beneficial for, the world and the people using it. But, what I'm looking for is more of a community manager type relationship based, ecosystem, like startup ecosystem centric position.
Cool. Within making an impact, what type of role are you going for? How defined have you, how defined is the role you're looking for, or how open are you trying to leave it? The more open, the harder, just so you know.
Yeah. Well, I've narrowed it down, with some talks with, the I'd Hire Me team, previously. Definitely something around like the accelerator market, incubator market, the VC market where, you have to be connected to multiple verticals. I think that's where I'll especially exceed in. So I'd say that would be my focus is like, community type or ecosystem type positions for accelerators and VCs.
Cool. That's pretty defined. Yeah, like community program manager type of things. So if I'm looking at this as like I'm hiring a program manager for something, I'm probably going to start like right around kind of here. This is where it starts to get more relevant, it looks like. Your contributing author positions are really good to have on there. I'd want to see more about this. Like, this is a standout. So, like, tell the story of that a bit more. There's no description under this, but I'd want something that's like, I don't want to have to ask you on the interview to explain that. I'd be like, just tell me what happened with Event Integrity, right? And I want to know that you came out of it not looking to be a founder, because whenever I see somebody who owned a company or started a company who is applying for a job, my first reaction is, they're taking a job until they can find the next company, which is when? 2 months? 9 months?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here? And I think you want to kind of snuff out that objection right there. Be like, this was awesome. Here's what went well. Here's what didn't go well. It wasn't an enormous acquisition, but we had an exit. I learned a lot, including what I want to do and what I don't want to do. And even something to that effect will be super helpful in helping someone just be like, okay, yeah, I get it. I get where you're coming from. Just the history, it's a mixed bag, right? Like you've done a ton of different things, and it's so mixed that it's hard to kind of like place you almost. So take your chance to fix that, right? And same advice. Like the fact that you have a headline that's interesting is good. What I'm going to question is whether that headline is the most accurate for what you're trying to do. So I see here the service provider, rewriting, editing, so forth. I imagine you don't have the looking for roles thing open because you don't want to alert your current employer, right?
Yeah. I'm not ready to do that quite yet.
Okay. So then the question is, how can you use your headline section to not necessarily convey that you're looking for a position, but what type of position it is. Impact is nowhere in here, nor is community. I mean, people, yes, but not community. So what I would, the challenge I think is to come up with a headline that emphasizes that includes that. So someone who runs a company that they believe is mission driven and impactful, or as a VC or an accelerator, having that accelerating that impact on the world, they're going to want to look for those keywords. They're going to look for the fact that you describe yourself as that. And so your Venn diagram is more like, what are the things I can say about what I'm currently doing, and what are the things that I can say about what I'm going to do? And in this case, what you're going to do is people development, community, program management type of roles for impact-driven groups, accelerators, VCs, and so forth. And then whatever it is you're currently doing, there is some intersection there, right? With sales, BD, technology, product discovery. I don't know the company particularly well, but I imagine that there's some intersection there of what you're doing and why it's important to you. Whether it's the themes and values of discovery, technology affecting the world, having an impact, right? So the headline's a bit difficult from a copywriting perspective, but I might go with something like I would take events out. That's kind of like a scary word right now. If you say events first, people would be like, well, no one's doing events for a bit, so like, no, we can't do that, right? So I would be like, lover of community, people, tech, that impactful tech, and writing the stories of all of them, something like that, right? But just sort of take out the keywords that are going to scare people, put in the ones that are more relevant to what you want to do. You're not making it clear you're looking for a role. You're communicating the impression that's more accurate to those that are looking for it. Again, the same principle applies. You want this to be a landing page. And so the headline's a bit tougher in this case, but it's your primary real estate. What do you think so far?
I mean, I think that's very insightful. Yeah, I think it does make sense to do that. You know, I kind of came in with the whole LinkedIn stuff with slightly a different mindset. You know, just stuck on some things that I've learned from, you know, other experiences where, you know, for example, Hatham on our last call said, you know, if you're applying to the NBA, you don't tell them I play basketball every day, I work out every day, and I train. Like, every single applicant does that. So, like, I don't know if I should say I want my work to be impactful. Like, doesn't everybody? You know, so that, I don't know, that's just, I guess, the devil's advocate to some of the things that you're saying. I do agree with it, but I guess that would be my only concern if I do that type of stuff.
That's a good point. I think the place to address that is here. Like, this isn't doing any favors. Like, this almost seems like the headline but pasted down here. And just like with Miriam, I would use the about section to address those sort of objections. So I read all the messages. It's happening time of day. So yeah, I would use the about section to do that. You might even start with one of those objections. And you might start it with something to the effect of like, everybody and their mother talks about making an impact with their work. Most people do. Here's my version of that, spaced out, right? And then you get a chance to tell your version of that story, whatever it is. And if you are trying to set yourself apart, like ideally you've thought through the further implications of what that means to you, right? So if you're thinking about, okay, what kind of impact do I want to make? That's a broad thing, right? I think about that all the time. My friend Robert is always hitting me up. He does sustainability consulting. And his clients and soon-to-be employer is they're all like doing something to the effect of helping address climate change. And he's always just like, Alex, I know you want to work on sustainability stuff. Come join us. And I'm like, it's not operational enough. It's not clear enough. What do you mean? How are we going to do this? So I've told him I generally want to make an impact on climate change, but it's not clear enough how. I was like, Robert, you haven't given me a clear enough story about how we're going to do this, and I can't bite off it, right? In the same way where you say, like, everyone says make an impact, sure. So then I guess make it more clear. In what part of the world or what issues on what issues do you want to make an impact? What will your role be as a connector, as a community builder? What are you open to? What are you not open to? the way I address what am I open to and not open to is more for BD for myself, which is what kind of clients do I want and not want. And I almost try to turn off the wrong people with this section more than I try to attract the right people. So you can think of your profile as like a positive negative, right? Like you can try to attract the right people by polarizing the bad ones out. I think all the people on social media right now who are like posting about not caring about losing followers due to posting about racial justice is a great example. You're basically saying, if you have a problem with this, I don't need to do business with you, which is exactly what I do here, just from a more business perspective on. We push back on ideas we don't agree with. We're not shy about turning clients to try to micromanage us. Like, this is an aggressive statement for an agency owner. And basically saying, like, if you're looking for a compliant partner to just do the things that you say and no more, you're in the wrong place. So, but it's not a negative statement. It's not saying like, go away if, X, Y, Z. So what can you say in your about section in your post content that communicates that? How can you get the right people on your side, the VCs, the accelerators? How can you talk about those things in posts more than just shares, right? Because that's not doing you a whole lot of favors. How can you discuss your perspective on that in a way that tells people where your mind's at?
Yeah.
And so if you're looking for kind of a mid-level role in community BD ecosystems, talk about that. What makes a great community? How is community more than a fluffy concept in a business strategy? How does the long-term vision of community as a strategy make more of an impact? I mean, these are just questions you can explore in these posts, and they don't have to be, and contact me today if you want to hire me to do this. That's understood. We can just discuss the issue and not have a call to action, which I'd recommend. Quick note on LinkedIn algorithm: when you post shares and links, LinkedIn will downvote your post because it takes the reader off LinkedIn potentially. And so what you're doing when you share someone else's content is, it's okay to do. It's just you're boosting their content, not your own. So you'll notice how I almost never post links or share content from my personal account. I rely on, this is an exception. I wanted to like bring donations. So, but you can even see what I did. I went into the comments and I was like, hey, help me game the algorithm by commenting on it, right? But mostly I don't share links or other content. Max one hashtag, just storytelling. Again, to sort of look at not the content, but the structure. There's almost, if I do include a link, it's in the comments. And that helps with engagement. So if you're going to, I recommend you do a post, but make it like original text. You're a storyteller. You refer to yourself as that. You write the stories of startup entrepreneurs. Especially in that role, I'm going to want to know that you've done it. If I'm hiring for this type of role, I'm going to want to see that you do it for yourself. So I think the bar is even higher for you to have a fantastic headline, corresponding about section, and original text post content or video that tells your story, because that's who you are. And so in the theme of show don't tell that we talked about with Miriam, it's the same idea. Where like, to show don't tell for you, it's to tell your own story, and that way a fund who sucks at telling their own story might look at you and be like, oh, I like how he told it for himself. Maybe he could do that for us. And that's what you want. You want to create that impression.
That's definitely very valuable, and I know I'm extremely underutilizing my about section.
Doesn't have to be a lot. And for both you guys, I mean, feel free to, once you've done the profile differently, any part of it, feel free to shoot it over. I'll take a look and let you know what I think. But yeah, I think it doesn't have to be a huge effort, but a good solid hour spent on the headline, about section, and then writing a post to publish one day between Tuesday and Thursday, roughly 9 a.m. That's going to pay huge dividends. Same principle applies as far as connecting. Try to build out that network if you can with people who are in roles you might want to talk to, people who run communities at funds and accelerators, like the folks at Runway. I mentor at Runway and WeWork Labs. I haven't talked to Runway in a while, but companies like this, you can even just sort of click on this, look at the similar companies section, wherever it is, similar pages. Try to find those sort of networking focused groups, and you can even comment on the company's posts. Right? If the VC fund publishes stuff, you could comment on their posts. I don't think FICA does. They don't. But yeah, I would connect with the leadership at those companies in a similar way, where like you can just link them to your post content and just build it out, have it there. Even if 30% say yes and 70% don't see it or say no, that's 30% of people you can DM later and be like, hey, how are things, right? You never know where that will lead. So as with building community for others, you can show that you're good at building community by building your own community around you, which involves, it's not necessarily outbound, it's just network building. So that's, for you, a next step that I would suggest.
Yeah, I'll definitely ping you when I make some updates to my profile.
Cool.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Alex. Let's stay in touch, and we'll ping you guys and kind of make sure we get these things up and going. I'll share the video with you guys afterwards too. We'll have some key takeaways. Obviously all of this is with the intent of having you guys put it into action. So nothing to lose. Let's do it.
Okay. Thanks so much. It was really helpful.
Yeah, thanks you guys.
And I will definitely send you my profile when it's done for you to look at, because I'd like your input.
Yeah, will do.
Yeah.
Thanks
Thanks so much.
Alex, that was amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
appreciate your time, Alex, and thanks, Hatem, like always. Talk soon.
Of course.